we were talking about the life of Venerable Moggallana, who was one of the Buddha's chief disciples. But based on the request from a few of you to bring everybody to the same level, we'll discuss the basics of Buddhism, since many of you are new to Buddhism and even perhaps new to Pure Land Buddhism. Today's agenda, I will cover what we left off last time, and then the remaining of what we talked about, the statues in the main hall that we were in, and the symbolisms in the temple. This way, when you go to other temples, you'll be able to recognize what those statues mean. It helps you to appreciate Buddhism on a level that can benefit you, but also it helps to deepen how you view Buddhism and how to apply Buddhism. And if we have time, we will talk about the etiquette of the temple. Continuing where we left the last time, we'll do a quick review. The Amida Society here is a school. We follow the Pure Land school. There are 8 major schools in Buddhism. For example, you have Zen, you have Tibetan Buddhism, or you have Pure Land Buddhism, you have Tentai, you have different schools. The Amida Society follows the Pure Land school. What is the significance of the Pure Land Buddhism, as opposed to Zen Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism? Hey, Anthony, could you turn on the AC? You mind? The great monks during the Tang and the Sui dynasties, over a period of about 300 years, studied the Buddhist scriptures and came to the conclusion that the most representative sutras of the historical Shakyamuni Buddha's 49 years of teachings was the Avatamsaka Sutra, Hua Yan Jing, Gen Hua Yim. And the last chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra is about a bodhisattva who taught the seeker of the truth, whose name was Sahana, to return to Pure Land. So essentially, you can say that at the end of all the different ways of searching for the truth, he found the Pure Land Buddhism. He found Pure Land Buddhism to be a way, the quickest way to enlightenment. There was another sutra called the Infinite Life Sutra, and in that sutra there are 48 chapters. That depends on which version, but one version has 48 chapters. And chapter 6 is the most representative because chapter 6 has 48 vows, which are the essence of Amitabha. And number 18 is considered to be the most representative. It's considered to be the king of vows, of the 48 vows. And vow number 18 says that rebirth to Sukhavati, or the Western Pure Land, within 10 recitations with sincere, joyful faith. So vow number 18 is the most representative of the Infinite Life Sutra. And we have vow number 18 is about recitation. There are different methods of being mindful of the Buddha, but name recitation is one of them. And the Amida Sutra, which we are studying, is the most representative of the 48 vows. So if you put it all together, Amitabha's name recitation, Amitofo or Amitabha, is representative of the Amida Sutra. And the Amida Sutra is representative of the 48 vows. And the 48 vows are representative of the Infinite Life Sutra. Infinite Life is another name of Amitabha. And the Infinite Life Sutra is the essence of the Avatamsaka Sutra, which represents the historical Buddha's 49 years of Buddha's teaching. So that is essentially why the significance of the Pure Land Buddhism. Okay. And then we talked about the meanings of these statues that you saw in the main hall, the different statues. We talked about On the very far left and right, we have the Dharma protectors. And then the inner standing two statues are the principal bodhisattvas of Amitabha Buddha, who is standing in the middle. And then you have the statue in the middle sitting, that is the historical Shakyamuni Buddha. And on the altar, you have the offerings. There are fruits, water, incense. These are typically displayed on the Buddha's altar. And these are called material offerings. Material offerings nurture generosity, called dana, bushu, bodhi, and virtue, sila, 持戒, mean precepts. So generosity is the fundamental of Buddhism. The act further honors the triple gem, sanpao, which are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the three jewels, deepening one's commitment to the path of enlightenment. Material offerings are symbolic. I mentioned this last time, but I want to elaborate a little bit more from another perspective to give you a fuller picture so that you can have a better appreciation of Buddhism. I think this is very fundamental and very important. So I do want to spend a little bit of time on this. This helps us to understand Buddhism in two ways. One is that it lays the foundation for understanding the Buddhist principles. And two, it explains why this matters in the present time, especially in our time. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are sages whose merits are infinite. They deserve things of heavenly qualities. But the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas don't mind accepting our earthly quality offerings. What makes our offerings precious to the Buddhas and the sages is our sincerity and respect. They have no obligation to accept our offerings or to help us, but they do so out of compassion, out of loving kindness. When they accept our offerings, we gain merits, 福报, 福报. But how is it that we obtain merits from making offerings to a cement statue? Essentially, that's what it is. It's a cement statue, I bet, that is well decorated, but it's just a block of cement, essentially. When we make offerings, we are nurturing the generosity within us. We are earnestly bringing forth the inequalities that we inherently have. Qualities such as loving kindness, meritorious deeds, selflessness, tranquility, wisdom, etc. When those qualities are brought out and utilized, we are the first ones to benefit. Our lives will be filled with calm and tranquility, and consequently, the quality of our life improves. We become more selfless and are more willing to help others. We will have less mental affliction. The primary cause of our agitation and dissatisfaction is due to our self-centeredness. When we focus too much on ourselves, it becomes like a magnifying glass. Any little dissatisfaction can turn into a big problem. Selfishness makes us less tolerable of the world. When we become more selfless, we can gloss over the little things that are really trivial. As a result, we become more understanding and tolerable. It doesn't mean that we become oblivious to things and let them slide, but we know how to deal with things without giving rise to mental afflictions, 烦恼. In other words, we have become wiser. When you are wiser, you start to see reality clearer. You feel more in control and become more joyful. Therefore, the quality of your life improves. This is easier said than done. What do I mean by that? It means that in order to see real improvement in your life, those inequalities have to be part of your life. You can't just go to class and learn about the principles and then forget about them when you leave class. Then there's no real change. in that learning. You have to live those principles, those qualities, right? Bring them out. Those qualities are you. You are them. They are part of every fiber of your body. That is the benefit of a spiritual community such as this one, where those qualities such as loving kindness, selflessness, tranquility, and so on, are not only encouraged, but nourished. The corporate America cannot do that. The companies may offer brief mindfulness sessions or employee resource group support or some sort of mental care support. I'm not saying those are not useful, but corporate America is not fit to help employees to bring forth those inner qualities because their purposes and their goals are not based on egolessness, 无我. For Buddhism, on the other hand, the goal is to transcend egoism. 佛法的目的就是超越无我，自我。So it's not just praying or prostrating to a block of cement, the block of cement statue, but to remind us that we have those perfect qualities just like the Buddha. And the fertile ground for those qualities to come to fruition are sincerity, and our respect that we have. Our sincerity and respect to the Buddha are the keys to bring those the best of our nature, our true nature, to fruition. My Venerable Masters often reminds me to go back to our true nature, live with our true nature. And what is our true nature? Well, our true nature is absolute harmony, tranquility, joy. When we make offerings with sincerity and respect, even to a block of cement, we are resonating with our true nature. And we are the first ones to benefit from our own practice. The only place that offers such suitable environment is the spiritual community. Perhaps a corporate environment that comes close to a spiritual community is probably in Japan or Taiwan, where the employees are disciplined and believe in the corporate goals to serve their customers and clients, and that they take pride in their selfless contributions. But once a company has gone public and is now owned by shareholders, earnings and profitability become priorities. Material offering in Buddhism is symbolic and meant to nurture our generosity and virtues. And this is not for idolizing. Some people do make offerings to the Buddha in exchange for luck, prosperity, health, or whatever. This is superstition. This is bargaining with the Buddha. This is improper. The proper way to pray to the Buddha is to ask on the grounds of causes and conditions, 因地, 因地, and not on the result, 果地. What I mean by that is causes and conditions, 因地, is that we should not simply hold out our hands and ask the Buddha to grant our wishes, but rather we should earnestly ask the Buddha to give us the strength and the opportunity to develop our individuality, generosity, and virtues. By individuality, I don't mean in an egoistic sense. By individuality, with a capital I mean we know who we are, we know what we want, we are responsible for our own individual development. We don't do harm to ourselves, we don't do harm to others, and we don't enable others to harm us. The material offerings, such as water, food, drinks, incense, and candles, are symbolic, and different Buddhist traditions have different interpretations. For example, the lighting of a candle or an oil lamp represents the light of wisdom, illuminating the darkness of ignorance. Flowers can represent the beauty of the Buddha or impermanence, as flowers wither and dry up relatively quickly. Fruit, water, drinks represent the nectar of the Dharma, 甘露法, and the wish to achieve enlightenment. I think it is apparent that fruit can represent the law of cause and effect. It's pretty obvious. You plant an apple seed, under the proper conditions, you will get apples. Even if you did not witness the planting of the apple seeds, but by seeing the apples, you can confidently conclude that it was an apple seed that produced the apples. Traditionally, there is no other way. And I'm not talking about exceptional cases such as bioengineering. I have to make sure my logic is not being, you don't find holes in my logic here. But furthermore, if we find ourselves wealthy, making easy money, the karmic cost for this is that we have planted the seed of generous giving of wealth in the past. If we find ourselves having the intelligence to be successful in life, then the karmic cost for that is that we have in the past shared knowledge to enable others to learn and to be successful. This is called giving of knowledge. Or if we find ourselves often in good health with little to no illness, then the general karmic cost for that is we have often given in the past fearlessness to others, helping them to alleviate their fears and anxieties. Or we have often fulfilled our responsibilities so that others can trust and rely on us to get things done for them without worries. Understanding the law of cause and effect helps us to know more about ourselves and our past. And it can help us to understand our future selves. Said differently, if one wants to avoid poverty, stupidity, or poor health in the future, then one should practice generosity in the giving of wealth, knowledge, and fearlessness. This may sound contradictory. One may ask, well, if I'm already in poverty and I can barely make ends meet, how are you expecting me to give wealth? Well, if one is already in the hole of poverty, then one is going to have to climb out of it somehow. At least one should be motivated to be out of poverty. Well, you may say, that sounds ridiculous. Why would anyone not want to be out of poverty and be wealthy? Just because one wants to be wealthy, it doesn't mean that one has the proper motivation. There is a big difference between worldly intelligence and Buddhist intelligence or Buddhist wisdom. The Buddhist term for intelligence in Buddhism is called prajna, water, vajna. So that's why we make a distinction. That's why sometimes we use the whole word untranslated prajna as opposed to wisdom, because it can be very confusing, because there is a big difference between Buddhist wisdom and worldly wisdom. Worldly wisdom or intelligence is gained from studying or experience, while Buddhist intelligence or Buddhist wisdom comes from understanding reality and having right view, 正见, 真经. Worldly intelligence is motivated by the ego, driven by the ego, ever-increasing greed, anger, and delusion. This is improper motivation. While prajna is egoless, without greed, anger, and delusion. This is proper motivation. Maybe an example would help to clarify the difference between proper and improper motivation. By proper, I mean that it's consistent with the law of cause and effect. It's consistent with reality. The efforts and conditions will lead to desired results. By improper, I don't mean that it's bad or evil. It's just that the goal that one pursues does not correspond to one's effort. Master Ching Kong gave an interesting example. There are many wealth-building books published every year, as you're aware. I mean, the market is probably in the tens of billions of dollars. There are books on how to get rich by picking the right stocks, how to allocate your assets to avoid taxes, and so forth. They have done thorough research, and it's very sound, but not all readers have become millionaires, as they promise. In fact, the authors themselves have not even become wealthy, let alone financial independence, and they rely on selling their books to make a living. The book explains methodically, just like the methods of planting a tree, the kind of soil that is needed to produce healthy fruits, how much sunlight is needed per day, how much water is needed per day, and so forth and so forth. This is all good, but it's not proper, because the book has forgotten one important thing: the seed. Without a seed, even the best soil in the world will not be able to help you to produce fruits. What is needed is the seed of wealth. That's what the books are missing. According to Buddhism, the seed of wealth is generous giving, 布施, bodhi, such as giving of wealth, time, and energy to benefit others. One can scheme and plot and plan and network with people all one wants, but without a seed of generous giving, one will not be able to produce wealth to enjoy. We can explore this from two perspectives, one from the spiritual standpoint and the other from the psychological perspective. Let me first explain this principle from the spiritual standpoint, which is the law of cause and effect. Essentially, it says you reap what you sow, you reap what you plant. You cannot expect to be wealthy and be able to enjoy your wealth with greed and selfishness. The seed of selfishness does not correspond to the fruit of financial freedom and security. Those two are not related. So how is it that by giving money to the needy that one becomes wealthy? Where's the logic in that? Where's the science in that? Let's say that we see a homeless person with his children and wife begging on the street. They are asking for help, money, food, whatever that we can spare to feed his family. When we give them money or food, enough to feed his family for 5 days or a certain amount of time, during that time, he doesn't have to worry about feeding his family for the next 5 days. Right? So in other words, we have provided him security for the next 5 days. You agree? Right? Bill Gates is known for his philanthropy. One time during an interview, he asked it was an interview about his support of the third world countries. Bill Gates asked the reporter, the interviewer, he said, "Do you know what the poorest people think about all the time?" He said, "There is only one thing on the mind of the poorest. That is, where is my next meal coming from?" They always think about food for their family. So when we give the needy food or money, we are actually providing them security for that duration, for that amount of time. So based on the law of cause and effect, what comes back to us is security. In Buddhism, it's called karmic rewards or merits, 福报, 福报. Security comes in many forms, such as wealth, reputation, power, good looks, relationship, and even food. Our karmic rewards will create security for us in a form that we so desire. Some people don't care much about money, about gaining money, but they want power. They feel insecure without power and position. Some people don't care about power and position, but without their good looks, they feel insecure. Some people are willing to give anything only if they can be with their lover forever, because only the love of their partner can make them feel secure. It is proper when our desire corresponds to our deeds, our actions. In other words, if we want security, we have to first plant the seed of security. You cannot expect people to respect you by being disrespectful to them. Right? Do you agree? That's very logical. If the law of cause and effect makes sense, then we should not be discouraged to give what we can to help others. Because naturally, what comes back to us is the security that we need. Now, let's try to understand generosity, 布施, from the psychological perspective. Are there any comments before we move on? So I just explained it from the spiritual perspective, the law of cause and effect. Me too.
I have 2 points that I want to bring out when you were talking about the lead back with nature behavior. And then when you was leading up with an example to use a candle or to use a lamp, why is it different from nature candle? Because when the candle light lit up, the candle is burn itself to bring the light up. That's called different nature. Because there's not only to bring up the light, but they have to burn themselves to bring the light to others. So they don't think of themselves, or especially when you do something, they don't think of, I will get a benefit of doing it. I just do it because it benefits others. So that's how it is with our nature.
Right.
Another example, I want to bring it up, when we were talking about giving our meals to people. Here, I want to praise Barbara, father. He's been doing it for 7 years. Every Saturday, giving food, he brought food, he buy food, toys, any kind of needed to give it to, not to homeless, but he give it to needy, working people from people. They're looking for work, but they don't say, I need money, I need food because I'm homeless. No, they look for a job. They're trying to do something to society, but because they don't have any other benefits, they have to find a job. But then if they don't find a job, they don't have that job that day, they don't have the meal. So Barbara's dad has been doing it for 7 years because he still was thinking, what if my son or my parents, my children will be on the same case? What if they don't find a job? They will be out on the street. Because of that love, nature love, and he thinking of those people. Every Saturday, 9 o'clock, going out giving those kind of needed for them. We went for that service. They only need $5. We didn't even have $5 to give them because we gave out all the blanket. We did meal. So these those kinds of examples give every member here see that why do we need to leave our nature? Go back to give out without asking being get back.
Yeah. So that's true generosity is when we give something that means we cannot enjoy that money, right? But we give because it's the right thing to do because it helps others, because it comes from that true generosity. So not every giving will produce the same amount of karmic rewards. When you give to a person who earnestly asking for help so that he can help others or he can help himself, is more beneficial than to give to a person who does not appreciate receiving that giving. And that person who may not be any good to society, for so to speak. So yeah, so it depends. So it requires wisdom to give. So not every giving is the same. Thank you, Venerable. Okay, so let's try to understand generosity from the psychological perspective. When we give to help others, we are actually empowering ourselves. This psychological empowerment boosts our creativity and self-confidence. Creativity allows us to see potential solutions of our pursuit, whatever that may be. And self-confidence helps us to overcome the fear, our own fear that holds us back, so that we can take actions and to go and give it a try. On the other hand, if one is stingy and selfish, one is psychologically telling oneself that one is poor and lacking. For instance, when you are generous in your giving, you are convinced that you yourself have more than enough to give and that you don't lack money. If you feel like you have more than enough, then what is that? Financial independence, financial security, isn't it? There's a big difference between financial security and a big savings account. If you don't ever feel financially secure, no amount of money in the world can make you feel secure, because you have convinced yourself essentially that you don't have enough to live the life so desired. You want financial freedom on one hand, but on the other hand, you keep reinforcing the idea in your head that you are financially insecure. Excuse me. When you are in the position to give, you actually have more than enough. If you have more than enough, then you will feel financially secure. But where does the feeling of security come from? It's more than tricking the mind to think that you feel secure. So where is the logic and the science behind this? When you give, you are adding value to the system. When you are a source to sustain the system, you are valuable. When you give to society, you are a citizen of value in society, which is essentially self-worth. When your self-worth is high, especially when you give generously and compassionately, you naturally feel confident and at ease in your environment, which allows you to be creative. As a result, you naturally feel secure in your own environment. If you have ever done volunteer work, you notice that after a whole day of hard labor, you may feel tired, but joyful. Joyful for the fact that you have made a contribution. Isn't that right? The joy comes from your increased self-worth through your contribution. A sad or depressed person usually has low self-confidence or self-worth. You try to cheer them up, but they are not motivated to be cheerful. It's like they feel that they don't deserve to be happy. They don't see anything in them, to be joyful about. That's lacking self-worth. There have been many studies on selfishness and selflessness and their relation to happiness. The study by Michael Dambrum in 2017 indicates that selfishness and selflessness are mutually exclusive, meaning you cannot be generous and stingy to others at the same time. The study showed that self-centeredness had two associated characteristics: egocentrism and materialism. By egocentrism, 自私自利, the author meant thinking like me first, then others. Materialism means I usually buy only the things I need, or my life would be better if I own certain things I don't have. This is happiness based on material possession. Selflessness has two associated characteristics: self-transcendence and connectedness to others. Self-transcendence means my peace of mind is not so easily upset as it used to be, or I feel that my individual life is part of a greater whole, and you don't just focus on yourself, but you recognize others, you connect with others. So you're transcending yourself. And then connectedness to others and to nature means the connection between you and earth, the environment. You have the thinking that we may look different, but we are all warm, red cell, red blood, we're warm-blooded. The study found that self-centeredness was positively and significantly related to fluctuating and unstable happiness. So the more that you focus on yourself, the more likely that your happiness will fluctuate and will change and will not be stable. Selflessness was positively and significantly related to authentic, durable happiness, meaning your happiness is very stable. The study concluded that the two are mutually exclusive because there is a little likelihood that selfishness and selflessness can operate at the same time. You cannot be selfless and selfish at the same time. Additionally, the two have a tendency to be in conflict and in opposition to each other, meaning that once you are selfless, you are not likely to become selfish. But once you become selfish, you're likely to stay there and not become selfless. The study bases this on hedonic principle. That's what I highlight in red. And according to this principle, the individuals are motivated to obtain pleasure and to avoid displeasure. 众生喜欢追求离苦得乐，chúng sanh thích lìa khổ đắc lạc. So that's the hedonic principle. We are attracted to pleasure, and we are repulsive to pain and discomfort. Attaining these objectives, 得乐得vui. In other words, obtaining satisfactions and avoiding pain creates a feeling of temporary pleasure, joy, and dissatisfaction because we're always running around to seek joy for our own self. The experience of pleasure is by nature fleeting and dependent upon circumstances because you run away from something to find something else because the environment has changed. And the environment is always changing, and that's why it's fleeting. Because after you're dissatisfied with this, you have to find another source to feed your search for satisfaction. But circumstances and environments are always changing. 世间无常，没有停止过。太阳vô thường, chưa bao giờ ngừng qua. So it is unstable and fluctuating, and the sensations it evokes soon become neutral, meaning that joy will then become no joy. No joy can turn into dissatisfaction or suffering. It's always changing. For instance, the first bite of our favorite ice cream tastes delicious. But if we have to eat 3 big cartons of ice cream, we will suffer. Therefore, by trying to maximize pleasures and avoiding displeasures, 离苦得乐, 离口得vui, self-centeredness produces unstable happiness, 短期的快乐, niềm vui ngắn ngủi. Cycling between pleasures and displeasures repeatedly, now happy, now sad, now happy, now sad again, and so on. Because the environment always changes. Does that make sense? Once we base our happiness on something else, on the environment, we are at the mercy of that environment. We're no longer in control. The environment now controls us. If the environment is favorable, we're happy. If the environment is not favorable, we become disappointed. Selflessness, on the other hand, is characterized, selflessness, which is characterized by generosity, would be positively and significantly related to authentic, durable happiness, 长期的快乐. By authentic and stable happiness, I mean by that, I mean that you are living the best way to live our life. It doesn't mean that you have tons of money. It's just that you live the life the best way that you see fit. You have authentic happiness, real happiness. Is when you have inner peace. You are in a stable of durable contentment and plenitude. 小欲知足，无ít biết đủ. Authentic happiness allows us to take in all the joys and pains that comes to us without afflictions. 没有烦恼，không có phiền não. The study concludes that when you are being selfless and generous, you have both emotional stability and harmony feeling. It is because you are more connected with others and environment. You don't see a distinction between yourself and others. You don't see, this is me, this is what I need to do to benefit myself. Others, people are invading my space. You don't see that distinction. In Buddhism, this ideal is called no ego or non-ego, 无我, vô ngã. But why would selflessness provide emotional stability and harmony feeling? It provides harmony feeling because when you are being generous and you give to help others, you are preserving life and minimizing damage. You don't see a difference between you and others. Helping others is the same as helping you, helping yourself. Helping yourself is the same as helping others, and that's called harmony. When you are in harmony, you may say something like this: I feel a perfect harmony between my ideals and my current life. Or that we may look different, but we are all, sentient beings, or we're all warm, red-blooded animals. When you are in the state of no ego, 无我的境界, you are in perfect harmony with others and environment. Kindness, based on the harmony principle, is not very sensitive to changes in the environment. And this is emotional stability. Does it make sense? Your happiness is no longer dependent on others, on the environment, but it transcends the environment, transcends the ego. Before I go to results. Another study done by Sprecher and Fur in 2006 notes that, and I quote, compassionate love, 慈悲, 德悲, may be experienced for someone to whom love is not reciprocated. So when you are really compassionate about other people, when you help them, you don't expect them to help you back because you give selflessly. If you truly have compassion to help others, you don't expect the receiver to help you in return. And you do so because it's the right thing to do. Even if they don't thank you or pay you back, you will not be troubled by that at all. So that's real compassion. And you are less affected by others and environment. Therefore, you are more emotionally stable. Does it make sense? But if you help people and you expect them to help you back, and if they don't, then now your happiness is at the mercy of them responding to you. And that's why egolessness transcends the ego, and it helps to maintain your emotional stability. Your happiness stays relatively constant, and it doesn't fluctuate between pain and joy. You are more stable. When you are generous, you have no afflictive emotions, 烦恼, 烦恼, such as hostility towards others, jealousy, anger, fear, threat, and so on. So here's the result, and don't mind about the math. I just want to show you this. I'm sorry if it's a little bit hard to see, but if you look at the positive numbers mean strong correlation. Negative numbers indicate weak correlation, and don't be concerned about the math. I just want to show you an excerpt from that study. But in English, what does this mean? It means that self-centeredness, 自私自利, 得得得来, has a strong correlation with afflictive emotions, 烦恼, 烦恼, such as anger, fear, and jealousy. In other words, when one is selfish, one is likely to be angry, fearful, jealous, and so on. When one is selfish, one is not likely to be in harmony or emotional stability. They will keep swinging between joy and pain. On the other hand, selflessness has no afflictive emotions, 烦恼, phiền não. One is likely to be in harmony with self, others, and environment, and emotional stability. As a result, one's selflessness leads to authentic, durable happiness, stable happiness. Are there any comments, or was there anything that resonated with you? So egolessness helps to preserve your emotional stability. Selfishness disturbs that emotional stability. How do we get here? We were comparing between Buddhist wisdom and worldly intelligence. Just to remind us how we got here, we started to talk about food offering to the Buddha as a reminder of the law of cause and effect. Whether people believe in the law of cause and effect or not, it doesn't negate it, as the truth does not belong to anyone. The Buddha does not create the truth. He just discovered the truth. It doesn't mean that the law of cause and effect is only applicable to Buddhists and not non-Buddhists. The law of cause and effect tells us of our past deeds based on our current situations, what we have done in the past. And it can tell us our future based on our current deeds. To understand reality, worldly knowledge alone is not enough, because worldly knowledge is blinded by greed, anger, and delusion. Understanding reality requires right view, 正见, 真见, and its basis is one without greed, anger, and delusion, distorting reality. We then use gaining wealth as an example to differentiate between worldly intelligence and Buddhist wisdom, prana, border, prajna. Due to distortion from one's greed, anger, and delusion, that worldly intelligence is limited. By that I mean worldly intelligence is sometimes consistent, and sometimes it's inconsistent with reality, because it cannot see the whole truth. For some common sense stuff, it's consistent with reality. For example, you should be nice to other people if you want other people to be nice to you. Where situation becomes more complicated, especially when the ego is threatened, it becomes inconsistent with reality. One may think, why should I use my hard-earned money to help others? If I don't help myself, who will help me? Right? The ego, 自我, 本我, does not understand the value of non-ego, 无我的价值, 价值, 价值观, 无我. We discussed a study showing egoism leading to temporary and fleeting happiness and afflictive emotions, 烦恼, phiền não, such as anger and jealousy, while non-ego leads to authentic and stable happiness. The purpose of studying Buddhism is to break through that kind of mentality that limits us, that holds us back, that makes us fearful. So Buddhism is very symbolic. Who would have guessed that fruits can be so deep in meaning, and it took us almost an hour to talk about it. But I think it was worth it. I hope that it was helpful to clear up some fundamentals of Buddhism. Do you have any comments before I continue? Yes. Yes, Irene.
I was just thinking, I think possibly that is beyond just money. So I think that might be the reason it's a lot that we see in society. There are people doing one thing, but then people doing the other. Very few different.
Right. She said that the law of cause and effect transcends the 3 periods of time. And so it's very difficult to understand it fully. Because there, for example, you see wealthy people who are evil or who are very stingy. So if they're stingy, then how is it that they are wealthy? So it's very difficult to understand and appreciate the law of cause and effect. And that's because it transcends time. It covers the past, the present, and the future. And that's the problem with worldly intelligence. And in other words, that is the problem with not gaining Buddhist wisdom, is that once you have done something meritorious and you gain karmic rewards without right view, meaning without greed, anger, and delusion, it amplifies your greed, anger, and delusion. You become more protective. You become more egoistic. And so it's not that they become wealthy because of their greed, but it's because of their generous deeds in the past, but because without Buddhist wisdom, that they believe that what they have achieved is beyond the law of cause and effect. They believe that they transcend the law of cause and effect because they can hurt other people and still be rich. They can be selfish and still be rich and wealthy. But they don't realize that what has got them here was not their stinginess or their selfishness, but their generosity in the past. But they have forgotten that. Because if we really look at it from a scientific objective perspective, the two are not consistent. Any person with a clear mind would see the inconsistency between the two, right? Selfishness and independence or joy are not consistent. And so, but they come to that conclusion because they have been fooled by the ego. They have been fooled by the current situation. And so what they are doing is that they're depleting their merits. And of course they will face, after they have depleted the merit, what usually happens is suffering. And I was going to cover this a little bit, but I'll cover this now because it's relevant to Irene's question, is that the function of merit or karmic reward is to satisfy our desire. For example, if you go to a shopping mall and you can buy anything in the mall without looking at a price tag, without even have to check your bank account balance, see if you have enough to buy that item. You go to the car dealership and say, I want that car, I want that color, I want to customize this way. Give it to me, deliver by next week. But then they say, sir, but it's going to cost you $1 million. Deliver in 2 days, I'll give you $2 million. If you are that kind of person, that's called a person of merit or karmic reward, because you can achieve that. But if we go to a store and before we buy an item, we have to look at our bank account and make sure we have enough, then we know we lack merit. So merit allows us to achieve what we desire. But the problem with merit without wisdom is that we believe that it's our, we disregard the law of cause and effect. We don't know how we receive, how we obtain what we, our ability to afford certain things. Yes.
I just want to rephrase when you say some people one day want to buy something, they look at the bank to see if they have more money. But have you aware of some people being taught when they were a child, when they want to buy something, they have to be thinking, is that I would really need it for myself, or really do they actually need it for what? Not only they would reluctant saying, I don't have the money to pay for it, but do I really need it? For example, for us monks, when we buy something, we have to reconsider. This is our money, where the money getting from the slave people who made it to us. Do we use it correctly or not? Or do we really, really need it? That doesn't mean that we don't have money to buy it for, but because we're thinking of others.
Yeah. Right. So yes, we do have to be, because we don't want to deplete merit. I was listening to a lecture, and there was this nun who was in the temple, and the abbot. One day, the nun went to the abbot to say, "Masters, our temple has no more rice. What are we going to eat today?" And the abbot goes to the main hall, and he says to the Dharma protector, say, "Our temple has no rice. Do something about it." That evening, there were lay people bringing in food. And so we know that abbot has merit, because whatever that he was asking for, there was a resonance. There was a response to his request. So what I'm trying to say here is, when we have merits, it's not that we should deplete our merits, but whatever the purpose of merit is to satisfy what is it that we are seeking. A person without merit is a person, they can try and plot and plan and scheme and connect with people, but they will not be able to achieve their goal. And so when we talked about, Irene brought up about the how it is so difficult to understand the law of cause and effect, because it covers the past, the present, and the future. And the people who are rich but stingy, it's not that because they of their greed, their stinginess, that they are rich. So I just want to clarify that the seed and the fruit have to be consistent in order to be consistent with reality. Does it make sense? Right? Okay. Okay, so next I would like to introduce to you the two scrolls written in Chinese. In Chinese, as you can see, the two scrolls on the left and the right-hand side of the altar. Let me see. I was going to go to the. Let me go to this, and then I'll jump back. Okay. So on the scroll on the right reads, "Li Phổ y bai, Phổ chân wu liang, Lai Phật một lại, Phước tăng vô lượng," meaning that a single prostration to the Buddha greatly increases one's merits. Buddha is one who has achieved infinite merit and wisdom. Phổ 就是两足尊, 福慧圆满. Phật là lượng túc tôn, phước tuệ viên mãn. When we prostrate to the Buddha, we are being receptive to the Buddha. When we are being receptive to someone, we are agreeing to whatever they provide us. In this case, the Buddha is an unlimited source of merits. We are also receiving unlimited merits, but depending on how much we are willing to receive is how much we will benefit from it. When we are not 100% receptive, we are turning on our filters essentially, and to receive only a small portion of it. We limit the reception for two reasons. One is that is all that we can take, and we have some reservations to take it all in. Two is that we take in only what we can recognize, thinking that the rest is of none value to us. So let me go back to this example. The Buddha gave an example in the Lotus Sutra, Hòa严Kinh, Kinh Pháp Hoa, Phả Hoa Kinh, Kinh Pháp Hoa, that the Buddha's teaching is like the rain pouring down. Trees with big roots can absorb large amounts of water, while grass with small roots can only absorb a small amount of water. Those with big spiritual roots, 善根, 田根, can benefit more from the Dharma, and those without good roots, benefit none. What does prostration to the Buddha mean? And I'll use this as an example to illustrate. In the ancient India, people highly prized their hairstyles because they were status symbols. Based on your hair style, people would know which caste you belong to. Therefore, the head was the most important part of the body. In the ancient India, people walked barefooted, stepping in mud and all kinds of dirty things. So the feet were the least revered. Prostrating oneself at the feet of someone is the act of full submission and respect. One is taking one's head, which is the most revered part of the body, and placing it at the feet of someone, which is the least revered part of the body. One is essentially saying, even another person's feet are more important than my own head, which is full reception. Does it make sense? Right. So that's what bowing to the Buddha means. You may ask, well, this makes sense, but what is merit, and why would I want to gain merit? Well, merit, karmic rewards, 福报, is generated when you do something to help others or to enable others to be helpful to someone else in a skillful way. The key word is skillfulness, 善停. For example, when you see two people arguing and they are about to hit each other, and so trying to be helpful, you give each one a stick. This might be helpful, but not skillful. There's no merit in this action. But if you see two friends arguing and you are able to resolve the conflict and restore their relationship, then there's merit in that action. Or you volunteer your time and or contribute money so that an event can be successful to bring benefits to people, then there's merit in it. But why is merit important? We kind of touched on this earlier, but one way to explain merit is the value of a person. You can say merit is like the currency of life. The purpose of merit is to satisfy one's objective. That's what we talked about. So when you are able to afford something without worry, then you are a person of merit or karmic rewards, 福报. Or, for example, like when a person is new in a country with just an elementary education, who can barely hold a full conversation in English, somehow is daring enough to open a business. He gets the help he needs, and years later becomes financially wealthy, enough to buy houses to rent out, and who can whip out $100K for his daughter's wedding like it's nothing. So that's called merit. He can afford to do that. Merit is more than just karmic rewards, meaning that you are rewarded for your karma in the past. In addition to good deeds, there is virtue of kindness. Just like the Venerable Master was saying, that is how you use that money. Do you use it to, in a irresponsible way, depleting way? So merit here I'm using in a more positive sense and just to go out and enjoy because you can afford to do so. When you are young and strong, you can use your physical labor to get the services that you want. But when you are older and more feeble, it is your merits that attract people to provide the care that you need. Those encountering abuse and abandonment is called lacking merits. I'm not saying that it's their fault that they get abused or abandoned. But if we can prevent abuse and provide safety to them, then that is a meritorious deed. Merit is you can say enabler. If you have material enjoyment, your merit will enable you to achieve your objective. So if you have merit, you can go out and enjoy the world. Or if your goal is to attain meditative bliss, something that transcends the world, then your merit will enable you to sit without worrying, so that you can practice, you can concentrate on concentrate your mind. Without merit, you won't be able to sit in meditation blissfully. Or you won't be able to sit in this class for an hour and a half without thinking where your next meal is going to come from or how you're going to pay your overdue bills. So you can say that you have merits. You have karmic rewards. Because after this class, without lifting a finger, food will be provided to you. Delicious food. There are people around the world who are running from bullets or facing disasters. Their lives are full of worries and anxieties. They want to have peace and rest, but they cannot have it. Because of your merits that you can sit here without anyone bothering you. You can choose to leave, you can choose to stay, you can choose to listen to, you can choose not to listen. You have complete freedom and nobody bothers you. If your goal is to for example, your goal is to be able to come to class and you are achieving that goal, it is because of your merit, but it is also because of the support from the Dharma protectors that arrange things for you so that you can come here, as opposed to things popping up, pulling you away, losing that chance of becoming wiser or understanding reality more, that helps to make your life better, right? To improve the quality of your life. As we have mentioned earlier, if there is selflessness, 无我, vô ngã, in our merits, our good deeds, then the joy is authentic and stable. The joy from meditation and learning the Dharma is not like an excitement kind of joy, like going to a party with loud music and drinks, but calming and stable. If you don't have a meditative mind, you will find the calming and stable joy to be quite boring. You need to have meditation in order to appreciate it. In the Kula Dukkha Kanda Sutra, dukkha is suffering, kanda is heaps, or there are. So in this sutra, Ku Yun Xiao Jing, in this sutra, there was a group of Jain ascetics, 耆那教者, who came to the Buddha for teaching. Then a question came up whether the King Bimbisara in that sense, was happier than the Buddha, or the Buddha was happier than the king. So they must have thought, well, the king's got all these palaces, he's got all this army, he's got all this wealth and all the beautiful women. The king is obviously happier than the Buddha. So that was their thinking. But the Buddha asked them in return, is King Bimbisara, Pinpo Solo Wang, Teng Basalavu, capable of experiencing perfect happiness for 7 days and nights without moving his body or speaking? Can he just absorb and enjoy his wealth, enjoy his worldly pleasure completely? They said, no, Reverend. The Buddha says, how about 6 days? He said, no. 5 days? They said, no. 4, 3, 2, 1 days? To which they said, no. The Buddha replied, but I am capable of experiencing perfect happiness for 1 day and night without moving my body or speaking. I am capable of experiencing perfect happiness for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. What do you think, Reverend? What, this being so, who lives in greater pleasure, King Bimbisara or I? They said, this being so, the Buddha lives a greater pleasure than King Bimbisara. So excitement of the world is like that. The parties, the music are fun at first, but it's transitory, temporary. We will soon find the current entertainment to be boring and have to find something else to replace it. With meditation, we can enjoy even in simple activity for a long duration, and the joy is more stable. Without a meditative mind, even all the shows on Netflix cannot even satisfy one's craving for entertainment. One will find oneself scrolling, flipping through the movie listing mindlessly, looking for the next entertaining distraction. Does it make sense? Right, so that's why meditation is important, because it helps to contain your joy, your happiness. Without meditative mind, your mind will be jumping and trying to find the next distracting, entertaining. Does it make sense? When we earnestly prostrate to the Buddha and are receptive to his offering of infinite merits to us, it is not just to find temporary joy in the worldly entertainment, but to find authentic and stable joy in meditation and wisdom. Is there anything that you'd like to share or for me to elaborate? Is it clear? So, and then we have a little bit of time left. The scroll on the left reads, 念佛一生, 罪灭河沙, 念佛một tiếng, tội nghiệp hạ sa. This is translated as a single recitation of the Buddha's name eliminates sins as numerous as sand in the Ganges River. Ganges here refers to the Ganges River, a very long river in India. And it's the amount of sand in there is incalculable. 无边. So our faults and sins are like taxes on our merits. They will eat into our merits and deplete our merits, our karmic rewards. We may be diligent in cultivating merits, 修福, 度福, to help people, but if we are not disciplined in our conduct, especially to avoid taking life, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxication, then we are draining our merits very quickly. Our misconduct or sins, and it may be as simple as disrespecting others or nature, or as serious as arrogance, can quickly deplete our merits. But how can arrogance deplete one's merits? As mentioned earlier, the function of merit, 福报, is to satisfy one's objective. And of course, the result is the feeling of satisfaction, which will neutralize this corresponding merit. So the more satisfaction there is, the more merit is required to balance it out in order to maintain that equilibrium, to maintain that balance. So there's a lot of self-satisfaction in one's arrogance, such as the satisfaction in one's success in defeating others. There's the satisfaction in seeing the failures of others. There's nothing that can be more damaging to one's merits than self-pride and arrogance. Now, to a point where one's merits can be completely depleted. Unfortunately, one doesn't stop to be arrogant when one's merits have been depleted. There's no stop. In fact, very often, one becomes even more arrogant. What will happen when one continues to be arrogant beyond that point? Well, what happens next is that one will have a deficit of merits. What will happen then? Well, one will face failure. One's calculations will be wrong. His support will be nowhere to be found, and his pursuit is something is now beyond reach to be accomplished. Before, when he still had merit, he had the satisfaction in everything that he did. But now with deficit merits, there's only dissatisfaction and frustration in everything he does. So when you have no more merits, and when you're in the negative, you find dissatisfaction in everything. Even with people encouraging you, helping you, you will find dissatisfaction in that, because there's no more self-value that you can find. So I wonder if this makes sense to you. So that is the significance of avoiding sins or misconduct, especially disrespect and arrogance. They deplete our merits faster than we can cultivate, than we can compensate for it. And without merits, we won't be able to function successfully in this world, because merit is the currency of life. Without merit, we will encounter failure, dissatisfaction, and even suffering, right? Are there any comments before we continue? Yes.
I just want to add to that something. We are studying Pure Land Buddhism. I think when we decided to listen, we're also calling out our Buddha. It's because we are
Yeah.
Leave it alone, period, without thinking of this is something nice, together, etc. It's that kind of, sometimes you will fall into the world of beliefs.
So Irene was saying that when we chant or recite the Buddha's name, we're resonating with our true nature. And it's more than just cultivating merits. It's more than just eliminating sins, but we are constructing our own Pure Land because we are resonating with the Buddha. The Buddha by nature is pure. And so when we are reciting with the name of the Buddha, we are resonating with that nature of purity. And we are, in a way, constructing our own Pure Land. And in order for us to become a Buddha, we have to have our own Pure Land. That's the definition of Buddha. Is like, if you are to be a leader, you need to have something to lead. You need to have people to follow you, to want to follow you, to study with you, to be helped, who want you to help them. So because that's the definition of a leader. So a Buddha is not like a person who claims to be a Buddha, but because of the environment that orchestrates things in such a way that makes this person who is willing to sacrifice the most to help other people. So it's very democratic, you can say. That's why it's a Buddha, not because Shakyamuni Buddha claims to be a Buddha or Amitabha claims to be a Buddha and that's why he's a Buddha, but because of his generosity, he's willing to construct purity around him and people can benefit from it, and that's why he's a Buddha, because he has achieved unlimited merit and wisdom. That's why he's a Buddha, not because he's a Buddha, now he has merit or wisdom. But the two often go together. We want to burn our own candle, like the Master says, to light up the environment. And that's why we value the candle. Because the candle, if you don't use it, it has no value. You don't use it, you don't allow other people to use it, then that candle is useless. No matter how pretty it looks or how brightly it can burn. But if you're willing to burn that candle, then that means you're willing to sacrifice the candle. The candle is willing to sacrifice itself to light up the environment for others. And that's why the candle is valuable, and not because the candle is valuable and you want to preserve it. No, it has to be used, right? So when we vow to be a Buddha, that means we are courageous enough to sacrifice what we have to others. But when in that sacrifice, because of egolessness, that we don't actually lose, but we gain. Because what we are losing, we do lose. We lose greed, anger, and delusion. So what comes back is none greed, none anger, none delusion. And what comes with that is wealth, merits, and wisdom, naturally. Right? It's just like pushing a balloon. You push on one side is depressed, but the other side pops up naturally. So there is no, so from the whole holistic perspective, there's no losing, no gaining. But in order to gain, we have to put in some effort to cultivate it. So it's not that we say, oh, there's no losing, no gaining, I'm not going to do anything. Well, if you're going to do anything, you're not enabling things to transform. Does it make sense? So there are two more statues in the main hall to introduce to you. But we can go over very, very quickly here. And one on the left-hand side of the main hall is called a Medicine Buddha, who is quite popular actually because he provides what sentient beings need the most: health and longevity. Amitabha is the principal teacher of the Western Pure Land called Sukhavati, Happy Land. The Medicine Buddha is the principal teachers of the eastern quarter of the universe, the eastern Pure Land called Lapis Lazuli Light Land, Luli Guan Jingtu. Lapis lazuli is a precious crystal. It looks bluish, kind of like this. So his land and all the sentient beings are made of this precious crystal. When he was still a Bodhisattva, he made 12 great vows, one of which says, when I have become a Buddha, anyone upon hearing my name who suffers from powerlessness, stupidity, illness, or bodily deformation will immediately be well and strong with their wisdom developing. Or another vow says, should anyone who is weak, poor, diseased, or unlawfully oppressed without help from others to take care of him or her, upon hearing my name, he or she will be released from such misfortunes. He will be peaceful and will be able to continue his cultivation until enlightenment. So the meanings of the sutras are very deep, and we cannot simply take the words at face value and say we have understood them. For example, the sutra says that upon hearing the Buddha's name, all calamities and misfortune will be eradicated, will be eliminated. As we explained earlier, the Buddhas are more than capable and more unwilling to help us. It depends on how much receptive we are to their merits and wisdom. So having the affinity, yuan, yin, to hear the Buddha's name is a good start. But it's not hearing one ear and out the other, but it needs to give rise to wisdom. So I want to take a few minutes here to explain this deeper, because it helps to dispel some of the misunderstanding and even superstition in Buddhism. So when you read the sutra and say, upon hearing my name or the Buddha's name, all calamities will be eradicated. So we have heard the Buddha's name, but we're still being troubled. So is that true or not? We have to understand this a little bit deeper in order to appreciate it. The word here is translated from Chinese character wen, wang. The word is used in hearer, which is savaka, which is a class of sages who have attained enlightenment by hearing the Dhamma from the Buddha directly. Because during the Buddha's time, there was no writing. There was only oral transmission, such as the disciples of the Venerable Saripatra and Venerable Moggallana that we're studying. So the word here also means to study or to learn. So it's not just to hear, but to mean to learn and to study. Traditionally, there are three ways to develop wisdom. Wen, shi, xiu, wang, tu, tu, meaning wisdom from studying the Dhamma, wisdom from contemplating the Dhamma, and wisdom from cultivation or meditation. The ancient language was not as expansive as today, probably because writing was not very easily accessible, and each word could have many meanings. So the word here can have many meanings, and in this case, it means to develop wisdom from studying. So to study is to try to understand something. So to hear the Buddha's name means to understand the meanings of the Buddha's name, not just to hear, but to understand the Buddha's name. But what does it mean to understand something? It's more than just knowing its meaning, but to be able to apply it. Do you agree? So Dr. Philip Hahn can relate to this. I'll use this example here. Let's say that we're studying a calculus. We're in a calculus math class, and we learn about integration function. So we learned that the integration of x is x squared over 2 plus a constant. So if we were to face this test, we could give that answer. But it doesn't mean that we have understood the meaning. Until we know how to apply it, meaning that we have to code it in software or to create this electrical circuit in order to perform that integration function. But we cannot say that we didn't know the meaning of the integration function either. So we knew the meaning, but what we understood was only on principle. To really understand something is to put it into practice. So when we learn about the Buddha's name and the benefits, it's only on the surface. To be able to understand the meanings and harvest the benefits, we have to apply the meanings, those principles in our lives. So going back to principle to what material offerings that we talked about, the material offerings of the medicine Buddha is not to ask the Buddha to give us wealth or longevity, like praying to a god, but to follow his teachings so that we can attain health and longevity. The medicine Buddha has the ability to grant us longevity and health, but we need to know how to evoke it. The Buddha alone cannot help us, and if we don't initiate it, there won't be a result. If we want health and longevity, but the source that you are evoking is not capable of doing so, then there's no result either. So the saying goes, it takes two to tango. The source needs to be capable, but also we have to initiate that request. So I'll give one brief example, and then we will conclude. For example, let's say Tesla, they made all their patents open to the public. That means that anyone can use their patents to create the technologies for themselves. If we know what those patents mean, and we know how to manufacture the product, then we can save time and money to deploy our product to the market. But if we don't know what those patents mean, no matter how wonderful they may be, they won't do anything for us. So it takes two to tango, really. The patent needs to enable us to do what we're looking for, and we need to understand how to apply the patent. So going back to the medicine Buddha, how can one attain health and longevity? There are many ways, but all of them have one theme in common, which is to give fearlessness and safety to others. 无畏不施，无为不推. So if we observe the 5 precepts, and we are essentially providing fearlessness and safety. So meaning that people around us don't have fear of us, taking things from them, what they love, or damaging what they love. And so they don't have to be defensive, or that we are being responsible. They don't have to worry about that we're doing the right thing. So when we practice Buddhism, we are essentially giving fearlessness. Are there any comments before we conclude? So we discussed a few things today, and that's one more, but we'll leave for next time. But we talked about material offering, elaborated from another perspective than what we discussed the last time that we met. The importance of material offering is to nurture our inequalities, such as generosity, which helps us to improve our quality of life. There are scientific studies to confirm what the Buddha taught 3,000 years ago, that egolessness, 无我, vô ngã, is a state of perfect happiness, which is absolutely stable and connected with all those around us. Egoism, on the other hand, leads to emotional instability because its happiness is based on the environment and others, which are ever-changing. If your happiness rests on somebody else, then you are at the mercy of them. They change, your happiness will change. When we are willing to incorporate Buddhism in our lives, we will start to realize the benefits. We talked about the merits in terms of karmic rewards and security, which are very much needed in today's society. No fear. This is the value of learning and applying Buddhism, for me at least. The world is changing very fast, and for the majority of people, this brings fear and anxiety. I mean, you have to look around far, you see there is a lot of anxiety going on. So applying Buddhism can help to provide that emotional stability, right? So it helps to understand why we want to study Buddhism. And it's not superstition, it's not handing our hands out and praying or negotiating with the Buddha. I make a little offering of fruit, now give me a winning lottery ticket. But what we want, the security that we want, has to come from the seed of generous giving, right? So anything that you take away today, if you want to empower yourself, you want a beautiful future, the best thing to do is to start that seed, start planting that seed of generous giving.